first we're going to continue where we left off on Tuesday, which was REST API. But I finally figured out what that command was to run a Spring CRUD, and we're going to do that real quick. So let's take a look at that. I created the Spring REST CRUD. It was in the last video, and here's the annotation that you needed: at repository REST resource collection resource rel person path person. And so if you guys remember, this was the model that we created with entity, so that creates the table. And then over here we have the person repository, and it extends the CRUD repository, and that's it. This is all the code we have for this program. So when you go ahead and you run this, and then you open up Postman.
What does that path field mean?
That tells you the path of your URL. So it's going to be under /person.
Oh, okay.
I tried putting it under /API person, but it broke. So let's do this real quick. I'm going to go to application properties, and then I'm going to do server.port is equal to 8081, and then I'm going to restart this. And what's going to happen is I'm going to run this on port 8081, and then I'm going to go to IntelliJ, and I'm going to open up the other app, which was interview topics, or common interview topics, I think it was. Yeah, common interview topics. And then I'm going to run this one, localhost 8080. And so now that we have both of these running, I can show you that if we go to API person and we hit send, we're going to get an empty array here, right? But if we go and create a new collection, let's put another one here. We're going to create a blank collection. Oh, cool. You can add a whole new REST API basics. Cool. Okay, so this is get data. Base URL is going to be, oh wow, they show you like how to do all this stuff in Postman. That's cool. That's too advanced for us. What we're going to do is just create a whole new one right here. So I'm going to edit this, and we're going to name this one Spring REST API. And in here, we're going to actually, let's call it demo Spring REST API so that it's right next to our other one. What happened to our other guy? What?
Did you even make one for the?
I thought I did. Oh, that sucks. Okay, let's create another one. Add request. And this one's going to be get person. So here we're going to do localhost 8081/person, and when I hit send, I'm going to get this. It's actually pulling from this Spring REST CRUD here, okay? And you can see here that there is an empty list. So this embedded links self href profile, this is a special format that it's called HAL. And this is where we discuss what HAL is and why it's useful. So HAL, JSON Hypertext Application Language, or HAL, is a simple format that gives a consistent and easy way to hyperlink between resources in our API. Including HAL within our REST API makes it much more explorable to users, as well as being essentially self-documenting. It works by returning data in JSON format, which outlines relevant information about the API. So what that means is this right here is the link. This link's self kind of tells you what link you accessed. And then there's like another link for profile. I don't even know what this is. Let's click on that. When you click on this, oh, you actually get a representation of what the person is supposed to look like. What like it tells you what the schema is for it. So that's kind of cool.
So like what the body can have of a person?
Yeah. So this is what Spring Boot is. This automatically comes packaged with Spring Boot. And so when you hear people say it's using HAL or the HAL browser, that's what this is right here. All of this embedded stuff. But what you care about is this right here. Okay. So you want to make sure that your behavior matches what is in here. All right. So what do I mean by that? So I'm going to go to post here, and I am going to go to the body. I wish I didn't lose my other guy. The heck, man, I lost it. Oh, it's under new request. I didn't even create anything for it. So anyways, so okay, we got this here, right? So I'm just going to, I was hoping that we had an actual full body, but we'll get this one. So now when I go back here and inside the body, I put that in here as raw JSON. I'm going to paste that in here, and I'm going to be saving this to the Spring Data REST application. And I put it in profile, my bad. So let's do it again. Good catch. Good. So now you can see that it actually saved first name, middle name, last name, birthday, phone number. This stuff you want it to match. You want to match this stuff right here, right? But this links is that HAL browser thing I was talking about that gives you additional links that describe your object, your resource, basically. Okay. And what's cool about this is it even gives you an href here that actually takes you to the link of the person itself. So notice too how the ID. Oh, they don't even show you what the ID is, but well, they do show you the ID. They don't have it here. They put it right here in the href. So that's kind of cool. They kind of hide the ID so people don't have to worry about it, but they make sure that they include it here for the href link. So now if we click on this, and then we hit get, we should now get the one birthday of 12/12/1985. We don't have a first name, middle name, or last name because we didn't actually save anybody with that. So to do that, we're going to, let's just go ahead and do that real quick. Okay, and then no middle name, and then we'll have a phone number. Also notice that if I mistype something, it's going to ignore it. Okay, so if I put something like favorite color, it's going to ignore it because I don't have that as part of my model. So when I send this and I create it, it's going to create it at number 2, and notice here that there's no favorite color because it's not part of my model. And what do I mean by that? When I go here to Spring Data CRUD, and I go to person here, you're gonna see here there is no favorite color here, so you can't add a favorite color. Okay, so what you want to do now is let's start playing around with this. So if we go to person 2 here, right, and I want to make this a patch, and then I take out everything here, and then make this a Mary, then the patch should make it so that this record gets changed to Mary. So I hit send, and you see that it gets changed to Mary Doe. Okay, if I then go back and get all the records, I'll then see that one of them, I'll see that first incomplete record, which is right here, and then I'll see the second record, which shows that there's Mary Doe. So that's a patch. If I go back and I do a put, though, right, if I do a put on ID number 2, I'm going to erase everything in there and only have a record with the first name of Mary and everything else with null. So I'm going to go ahead and run that, and you'll see that it's saved right there. First name is Mary, everything else is null. So your job as for getting ready for interviews is to be able to not only, you got to be able to understand REST so well that you can just code it and that you can code it in your sleep. Okay. And what you want to do after that is you want to be able to write tests for it as well. If you can write tests for it, like you'll be a solid backend developer at that point, which is pretty much all you need to get a job. The UI stuff is extra credit. If you can, obviously knowing that will just make things even easier for you. But getting a strong basis in Spring Boot and the backend is pretty much your way in. Okay. So yes, so this is going to be, I'm going to put this on GitHub as well, but study it, go through and figure out, okay, how is a put supposed to work? How do you try to break it? Try to hack it. Like what we were trying to do here with the ID of 5, right? And then we're going to try to change 2 to 5. What does that actually mean? How is that going to work? Let's send it. It should ignore it, and it should be person 2 that was modified. And then delete works the same way as well. You call that, it will remove the person. Look at the way so here's things you can notice. We deleted it. They returned the person, but then they said the href of 2. What? Why would you do that? They're not going to exist anymore. When I hit send, it should be a 404. Yeah, that's so weird that they returned that reference URL. But just notice little things like that. Like try to figure out how is this CRUD supposed to work, and then try to compare it with yours. So when you go back to yours and you do 8080 person 2, in this case this was a 404, right? So on yours you should be returning a 404. So localhost 8080 API person 2 does not exist because we don't have anything in our service yet. When I hit send, ooh, see? That's a bug. I tried calling number 2, nothing came back, but it should be an error 404. Okay. Any questions?
So you're saying that whatever that Spring thing that you did to make this whole CRUD, it's missing the actual HTTP request that you should be sending out when you do commands like a get on a deleted person?
Yeah, no, that's an advanced thing. What I'm saying is in that you don't have to worry about that HAL browser or that HAL context stuff. All you really care about is the model itself. That's the most important thing you care about. REST API and how you deal with the model. What I was saying is that it was weird that Spring Boot allowed you, it lets you delete the record, and then it showed you at the bottom the ID of the record that was deleted. Because if you click on it, it's not going to be there.
Right.
Yeah, so I don't. It's just.
But you just did a get for an ID that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And this thing is giving you an okay.
No, this is ours. This is 88.
It's ours. Oh, yeah. Okay. I missed that. Okay. Yeah, so ours is bomb.
Mm-hmm.
But they give you an error code. Like it's actually working on the other one.
Yeah.
I see. Okay.
Is there like
is that even used in the industry at all, or is it just?
It is, but I've rarely seen it. I mean, remember how I said that people, you'll be lucky if people even use REST API, like because everybody's just throwing stuff at the wall type of thing. This is mainly for interviews. Like this is how you're supposed to understand how it's supposed to be, and then when you get into the crap show, that's the enterprise. You'll at least be one of the guys trying to fix things and make things proper.
To make something actually CRUD as opposed to however site shortcuts, whatever they do that validates the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, like right here, I'm gonna do a get. This is gonna give you the 404, right? See. Mm-hmm. So this is the Spring Boot app, and then this is our app, which is not right. So let's go in and let's write some more code on this, and this is going to give a segue into unit tests. Okay, so we're gonna probably take a long time on REST API because REST API is so important, and then we'll gradually move into the Java streams and the SQL queries. So, all right. So what we want to do is our get was not returning a 404. Okay, so over here in the get mapping person ID, what was happening is we call the person repository and we find the ID, and then we say if optional is empty, we return null. This is bad right here. We should actually be returning an error 404 here, and then we return the actual person themselves if they exist. So what we want to do is we want to adjust this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a service now for our actual business logic. So I'm going to call it, a person CRUD service, like this, and we're going to put it in here. Person CRUD service is equal to person CRUD service. We're going to create this field here, create the field here. It's now private final person CRUD service. The class does not exist yet. So let's go ahead and create this in our service package. Oh, I already got one. Cool. Oh yeah, I'm going to rename this to person CRUD service. Okay, and then once we go in here, we got to make sure that it's at service. And what we're going to call this is, we're just going to call this as, so this is a very simple problem. So obviously, if you really wanted to, you can do return new. You could do the same thing we did over here with returning a new response entity and then doing the not found like this, right? So let me show you the easy way to fix it, but this is not the way to do it. So yeah, you could totally get around doing this, and you're probably going to have somebody tell you, why aren't you just doing it this way? Why are you trying to make things more complicated? And the reason why is because this is a very simple case. When you get to more complicated logic, you want to make sure that the service is set up so that it can handle your logic and that the controller is very minimally used. Okay, so let's go ahead and do a HTTP status OK on the right here. Okay, there you go. All right, so now this is fixed. Okay, so we're calling the person repository directly, and if it doesn't exist, then we return status not found. If it does exist, then we return what's inside the optional, which remember is just a fancy word for like a basket or a bucket. And so this, we get the person from the bucket, and we send back an OK. And so now when we rerun this, this should work while the thing's running up. The thing is, it's not following. This is not following our architecture diagram here. Okay, so I have the controller connected directly to the DAO. Okay, so that means that the controller is not. It has two jobs at this point. The controller is figuring out how to do HTTP requests, and he's also dealing with business logic. Okay, it's easy now, but as you get into like 1,000-page applications and all, they get pretty crazy. Then this is gonna get very complicated. This thing will become so bloated, and then you have to write unit tests for it. Oh, horrible to write that kind of stuff when you have to work with HTTP stuff as well. That's why you want to make your service be pure Java, so that you can write unit tests for it very easily, and it's very logical. And then you delegate the translation to the other classes. So the controller talks to HTTP and only handles that. The DAO talks to the database and only handles that. This is another word for repository. And then the client talks to other APIs and deals with that. And this is all pure logic in the service. Okay, so let's go back here to person CRUD. So the person CRUD does not care anything at all about any of that other stuff, HTTP, SQL, any of that stuff. Okay, it's just pure logic. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get person. We're going to do get person by ID. And we're going to have the ID here like this. Okay, and so what we want to do is we want to then wire up the repository to this. So back to this diagram, the service is the one that's delegating tasks out to the other classes. So the service should be the one talking to the repository, not the controller. And eventually we'll remove the repository. We'll remove this from the controller. It should not be in the controller. Okay, so now that we have this, let's create this. So private person repository, and then we're going to create our constructor, public person CRUD service. Okay, so now that we have this constructor set up.
Wait, you made a constructor even though you put a service tag on the class itself? I thought that's, what is that thing?
Okay, so this makes it so that it's auto-wired. It creates an instance of this automatically.
Okay.
Right?
Oh, okay, that's right.
Of this guy right here. But the thing is that it needs a way for me to inject it. So this is what the constructor does. So I'll show you in the test. But the reason I do this, there's a very important reason for this. In fact, I'll take this off. I'm going to do it the other way. This is the shortcut way of doing it. Okay. This is
auto-wired. Oh, that's this. Okay, right.
Yeah, this is the magical way of doing it. The problem is that if you use magic to do it, you need magic to test it. So you're going to have to create a Spring Boot test to actually test this, which makes it this much. I mean, it will take forever to load. It takes like a few seconds to load. Whereas if you do a constructor, you are now in the vanilla Java realm. You don't need magic to test it. You can just pass in an object and then you're good to go.
I got it. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So now that we have this public person get person by ID, and then we're going to now call the repository this.person repository. So basically, it's just the same code over here, right? So this code here, we can just copy and paste it back in there, but I'll just redo it again, just so that you guys are familiar. So find by ID, we're going to pass the ID. This is going to return an optional, okay? And I'm going to hit Alt-Enter, create local variable. So this is creating a bucket that will hold a person. If the bucket is empty, so if the up bucket is empty, then what I want to do is I want to throw an exception, because that means my logic is flawed. So I can then do throw new, and then typically you create your own exception at this point. So let me show you how to do that real quick. So you're going to go start new package. You're going to type in exception. And in here, you're going to do a new Java class, and it's going to be called resource not found. I'm being very generic because I'm going to probably reuse these. So resource not found. Oh, I'm going to call it resource not found exception because I want to keep that tag and I want to keep that in the name so other people know that it's actually an exception. Okay, now I'm going to use inheritance here because I want it to be a type of runtime exception. So it's going to follow all of the rules of a runtime exception, except it's going to have its own name. That means it's unique only to my application. I want this. I want to know that this is my exception and not Java's exception. If it's Java's exception or some other exception, that probably means something blew up. If it's my exception, that means that I intended it for it to blow up. So to finish this, and this is all boilerplate. You can just memorize this. You're gonna do soup. You're gonna do create a constructor public resource not found. You're gonna pass in a message, and then you're gonna call it the super, which is basically calling the constructor of this, and you're gonna pass in the message that we feed to it. So the way you would use this is if this ID is not found, we're gonna do throw new runtime exception, and then we're going to say
would it be a resource?
Oh yeah. Sorry, my bad. Resource not found exception, and in here it's going to be person with ID is not found. Okay, so if it's empty, it's going to throw this exception. This is a simple case. So yes, it looks like I'm writing more code than I need to, but this is how you want to organize things so that you keep things compartmentalized. And so it's easy. So look at it this way: if I ever wanted to move the person CRUD service to like an Android app or to an iPhone app, right? I could totally do it easily. There's no HTTP holding me back. There's no database holding me back. There's nothing holding me back. The only thing holding me back is actually is Java language itself. But Android's written in Java also, so you can migrate it over pretty easily. And it'll still have the same exceptions and everything like that. You'll just have to handle them differently in the Android app. Okay. So now that we have this, now we're going to do return optional.get like that. All right. So now that we've done all of this, we can then go back to the controller, and instead of doing all of this here, we're going to replace this with a try and a catch. And if we catch the resource not found exception, this is where we then throw back the message that says return new response.
Your HTTP response?
Yeah, HTTP response. We could do return response entity dot of, and then we could then push back the not of response entity not found. So this is one way of doing it. Person CRUD service dot get person by ID. So that looks much cleaner. Let's actually take this out. Maybe we do need to do that. So response entity try return response entity dot OK parenthesis. There you go, like that. And I think I need to do this. So this is one way of doing it. Okay. Then the next way of doing it is to actually create your own response, which I'm kind of a fan of. So instead of doing a response entity person, what you would do is in your DTO, you would create a new response. So you can do like person response or get person response. Yeah, I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but I think it's very important. So then here we're going to have a private person, right? Person. Then we can have or we can call it, yeah, we can do that. And then we're going to have a private string, and it's going to be called error message, like this. And then what we want to do is if we want to hide the error string, so I think you can do JSON ignore if null. Okay, ignore null fields with Jackson. Jackson is the mapper that we use in Spring Boot. So if you ever hear Jackson, that's what that is. Oh yeah. So we're going to put JSON include.null. And so what this does is it'll make it look really pretty. In fact, we'll even be matching. We can even say that we're matching the Spring Boot one or the Spring Data REST one. So let's see. Okay, we got all this now. Okay, let's do this. So now that we're back at the controller, we are now going to return a get person response. All right. And so what we want to do is we want to return a new get person response. So get person response is equal to new get person response, like this. Okay. Then we're going to do person response dot set person CRUD service dot get person by ID. Let me just put it as its own thing. I was trying to get fancy, but you don't have to get fancy. Okay. So now that we've done this, we're going to then return the person response at the end. Okay. If for whatever reason we catch an error and the resource is not found, then what we're going to do is we're going to do person response dot set error message to e.get message. So when you do this, you're calling the service, you're getting it by ID. If the person exists, you're going to be able to get it. And then you're going to set the person of the response inside of here, and then you return it. If it doesn't exist, then you're going to catch the resource not found exception, and then you're going to set the error message and put it in here, and then you're going to return it here. So now when we run this, if it doesn't exist, it's going to have a pretty message. So this is we're going to do.
So you didn't even modify the error message. You're using.
Yeah, look, person with 2 is not found. And then if person is found, so let's post somebody. So we got one with ID. So let's do get 1, and we hit send. Then it should return.
Internal server error. That's error that.
Yeah. What the heck? What happened there? I kind of laughed because there's a bug. No default constructor for models person. Are you serious? Okay. So Jackson requires a empty constructor when you're trying to generate the JSON for it. You automatically need one. So if you ever run into that issue, just make sure you have a no args constructor. We don't have one because we used it to convert our person DTO. Okay, so let's go back and rerun this. That's nice. Good to know. I can't believe I missed that before. It's a very common problem you'll see. So let's go ahead and, I got to post them again. So post. We save the record. Now when we go to get /1 and we're going to hit send, you're going to see that the record is there. Now I'm going to do get to. Oh, notice there's no error message. Look how the response is in the body of its own with the field person and then the actual body there as well. So we're looking very similar to the REST API, which is here. So when I do get person 2 and I hit send, oh, I deleted it. When I do get person 1 and I hit send, you're going to see that, what? Oh, it's with all of them, I think. I could have sworn it was person. Yeah. Okay. So when you get all of them, you'll see right here that it's person, and then there's an array of person, and then they're all right there. So we don't have an exact match. They do person on get all, not on get one. But it really doesn't matter. It depends on how well you want to format your data. It's pretty much arbitrary. But this is one way you can do it as well. So now if we want to go back and do 2 and we hit send, notice that person is null. If you want to keep that there or not, it's up to you. But the error message will now appear, and it's using the error message that you created in your service class. So that can be very, very helpful.
Where did you put that message in the service class?
Yeah.
Maybe I didn't see what that was.
In the service class, it's the whole purpose of doing this constructor with the string message.
Right.
So then in here, you can do resource
right
found
there.
person with ID not found. Okay. So now that we have this, does anybody have any questions?
Oh, yeah, actually one question. So instead of sending out the HTTP request stuff, wait, what controller handles that, right? Go back to
controller handles this.
Oh, I got it. Okay.
Yeah. So
you're no longer sending like a.
Sorry.
Oh, never mind.
You're
good. I was thinking about like you sent before you had like this weird HTTP status thing, didn't you? That you were sending.
Yeah, it should be right here.
Yeah, so you're doing those. Instead of doing that, you're using your own error message. You're using a person response.
Exactly. Yeah. A personal response. Exactly. Yeah. It's customized. It's customized by us. And the way we did that was.
Yeah.
We used our own class here.
And this is preferred because.
It just looks prettier to backend developers.
Oh, okay.
I mean, you can even do this. So you can do Java class. You can do basic response. You see this a lot too. Basic response or base response. And in here you'll have private string. Let's just make sure to add data. Private string status. Private string error message. And we'll go back. I've never seen people get this fancy. I've seen some people get fancy with this, but this is definitely a nice trick. So we'll hide it if it's an error message, and then here for get person response, we can then get rid of this. Okay, so our get person response is only catered to what we're trying to return, the type of data we're trying to return, but we then extend the base response. So now everybody has access to these fields right here. So you can make responses for all your controller inputs. Excuse me. Okay, and then when we go back to our controller here, everything should. The only thing we got to do is we got to put the status. So person. Status or person response dot set status. Did I put a string? You can do it however you want. You can do HTTP status dot OK to string like that, and then over here you can do the same thing. Person response dot set status HTTP status dot not found to string, and then when you rerun this, you're going to even show more details in your backend. Make it look really nice. So let's go back and try to send this. There should be an error not found. There you go. So person is null. Status 404 not found. Error message person with 2 is not found.
But it says on the right side the status is okay. Is that because?
Oh, shoot! You're right. Good job. So what you need to do here is this sucks. Okay, so then here what you need to do is you can just no, I don't want to do a response entity. There's 2 ways of doing it. You can either wrap this whole thing with response entity like this, and then make sure you change it. And there's another way you can do it too. You can do it HTTP servlet response. So you can pass in the servlet response like this, and then in here you can do response dot set status to 404. Okay, so this is another trick with Spring Boot. If you pass this in as a parameter, it will give you this response in this it will give you the response object in this variable, and then you can then use it in here and then return it. Or you could just set it. You don't even have to return it. That's the cool thing. You don't have to put response entity here. You can return whatever you want, but then you can just set the status like this. So this is a nice little trick.
You're gonna pass that in to your.
No, it just automatically gets passed in.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's like principal. When you put principal, you don't have to pass it in when you call it. When you log in, it automatically does it. So let's go back and check this out. So we're going to call it again. And it says, so now it's 404 not found.
Yeah,
Status 404 not found. I don't know if I really, if I like this, you might want to change that. But then error message person with two is not found, and then there's no person.
You mean like because it doesn't really match exactly?
Yeah, it's not. It's an underscore. I mean, yeah. If I really wanted to, we could do like where we make it a number instead, or I don't know if there's a way to do a pretty string. What happens if we just do that? Nope, won't let us. Get reason phrase. There we go.
Get reason phrase.
Yeah, let's see what happens. So I mean, you could get really deep with backend stuff. Like we haven't even. Can you imagine? I mean, this is just so much with the backend. Oh, there you go. Cool. Not found. It looks better. But yeah, you could just get lost just doing backend stuff and database stuff, and not even touch the UI. But I highly recommend you learn all three because that makes you more adaptable and easier to hire. Okay, so we did a lot here with the controller. Notice how though this is all HTTP logic. So this endpoint is already getting larger. Just imagine if you had business logic in here. It get really bad, really fast. Okay, there's another thing. So there's another way you can do this. I covered this in the other video, but it's called aspect-oriented programming. And aspect-oriented programming, if you ever hear it, it's a fancy word for saying we want stuff on the outside. We want the happy path only, and stuff on the outside is monitoring our stuff and doing stuff to it. Okay? So with aspect-oriented programming, which I'm not a fan of really, instead of having to do all of this, you will just do this. And that's it, you're done. Okay? Why isn't that like, oh, I have to put it inside a person response. But yeah, all you got to do with aspect-oriented program is just do this, because that's the goal of it. The goal is you have a happy path, and all you care about is just making sure that the happy path runs, and you're good to go for the most part. You're going to have other configurations and other things on the outside looking in to then make this thing work appropriately. And one way of doing that is in this resource not found exception. Do you guys remember what it was? It was at HTTP, what was it? Response status. So response status would be value code is equal to reason is equal to resource not found, and the code is equal to, what is it? HTTP status not found. Okay, what is this thing here? What's it saying? Oh, my bad. It goes here. Okay, so what happens here? This is what the aspect-oriented programming style is you're putting stuff directly on the. I don't like this, but you're putting the response status on this exception. Whenever you use this exception, it'll automatically show that it's 404 not found. So if I go back here to the person CRUD or the controller, and let's just get rid of this response stat set status, and let's comment all this out, and then we'll copy this in here, and that is it. So now that we have this, we're going to return get person response like that. All right. So we hit all this stuff. We're making this just happy path, and we're hoping that when we get an exception, it'll put the 404. It'll still do the 404, and it'll have its own message of resource not found.
It's like basically moving code to some other portion of your implementation. It's the same thing.
Yeah. The problem is that if you ever see code like this, if you're not aware of that, and you go here and you start writing this, you're like, there's no error handling. Put a bunch of momos, and then you do it, and then they're like, no, dude, you had it all the exceptions had it. Then you look like the momo.
Right.
There it is right there. So 404, you can see right there. It actually looks pretty nice too. Timestamp, status error. So if you wanted to copy this in your own response, we could totally do that. But yeah.
And what was the tag that you had for that? That's part of what?
If you go here into what I'm talking about, aspect-oriented programming is like a pattern. It's like a
yeah.
Okay.
I get that, but what the tag that you use?
It was response status.
And that is from what is
Spring Boot?
Oh, Spring Boot. Oh, Spring Framework Web. Okay.
And but the thing is, you can't change this message. So the con of this.
Oh, that message that's actually part of like a parameter.
Yeah, and it doesn't even come out. It's not even there. It doesn't even care.
So that has to be right. Resource not found. Like that syntax has to be correct for this to work.
No, it's just it doesn't. You have the reason, but it doesn't even display it.
Oh.
Let's see if there's a way. There's something else we can display.
So why is it even there in the as a parameter for that?
That's a good question. I don't know. Let's see what else is in there. Reason, nope. Value, nope. Code. Yeah, I don't know. Let's see what that does.
You put it there twice?
Yeah, I don't know what it's
value or code.
Yeah, I don't know what that's going to do, but we can try real quick. Okay. Next thing we're going to do is tests. We're going to talk tests. Like I said, I'm not a fan of this. So I prefer to have everything localized in one area.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But But there are other people who do not like that. There are other people who are like, no, dude, make it simple by only putting the happy path. Because if you only have one line of code there, I mean, that does kind of look cool.
Yeah, but when something breaks and you have to like
Yeah,
start debugging, you're like, well, where the hell is this error actually coming from? And then you step into it, you realize, oh, it's going over here to this exception class.
Yes. So now that we have this, let's go to person CRUD service. We're going to write a test for this. So what we're going to do is we're going to show context actions, create the test, JUnit 5. And you can see here that there's a person CRUD service test. And what I'm going to do, it's down over here. Notice that it's in the same folder structure as the one at the top. Java is the only language that does this, where they follow the same pattern. So it's basically like a Java thing. Sometimes I've seen it where they organize C# tests like that also, but it's a little bit different. But yeah, this is kind of like a Java thing. It's nice. What's cool about this is that because these are in the same packages, you can make a method a protected method, and other classes in the same package can access them. So if you wanted to, if you protect the methods, they're not going to be available to other classes, but they will be available to your test class. So if you want to test internal methods, you can do that by making them protected and using this like file structure. Okay, I can give you guys an example of that too. So what I want to do is I want to create a control V. I'm going to call an integration test as well. I'm going to call this integration test. Okay, so we have a person CRUD service integration test. We have a person CRUD service test, and then we're going to create a new Java class person CRUD service integration test. I test person CRUD service with fake repository integration test. Okay, so I'm going to show you 3 different ways of doing this. First one, person CRUD service integration test. The Spring framework is what allows you to do auto wiring and all that stuff, right? So if you want to test with the entire framework, okay, there are examples for this, why you want to do this. If you want to test an endpoint that it was configured properly, or if you want to test, like if you're using aspect-oriented programming, you can't do Java coding at that Java unit test because there's stuff outside of your method looking in. So then you're going to have to use the whole Spring framework to make sure that all the stuff looking in can actually work properly. I hate it. It's so stupid. Okay. I'm getting like PTSD from it right now. So there's lots of reasons why you want to do a Spring Boot test. Sometimes you got to spin up the entire framework to make it to test. So you do that with Spring Boot test here, and then we're going to do private person CRUD service, and this is where it's different. We need to create an object, okay? Because we're running Spring Boot, we're going to let Spring Boot create the object for us, and the way we can do that is by doing auto-wired here, okay? So it's going to try to create a person CRUD service object / singleton for us so that we can test. Remember, a singleton means there's only one instance of it in memory. Everybody shares it, which is a nice thing. Okay. Any questions so far? All right.
So you're doing it on the actual service that you're testing. Yeah, CRUD service. Okay, you're testing.
Yeah, we're testing the person CRUD service. Yeah, that's why I have it right here. Person CRUD service, because that's the test. That's what we're testing. Now, Spring Boot test is an integration test. So that means that you can spin up real versions of other services as well. So we can also do auto-wired, and we can do private person repository and put it in the person repository like this. So by doing this, we're using the real version of everything and putting it inside of the person service CRUD or person CRUD service. So what does that mean? That means I can write a test. I can do public void get person throws exception, and it's automatically going to throw an exception because there's nobody inside this repository because I'm actually using the real database. And the real database in this case, by default, because I don't have it configured, is going to be an H2 database. So this thing is going to try to connect to an H2 database, and it's going to create, it's going to be working with that with real records. So then if I do person CRUD service dot get person by ID 5, then I should get an exception. Oh. So if I run this test, it should fail because it's going to get an exception.
So every time you run a test, it's going to start up Spring Boot, like it normally does with your server running.
Yeah.
And then it's going to run that command, that get command.
Yes. Look at how long it takes to.
Yeah, right.
Horrible.
How do you know which type of test to use in which situation?
The reason I'm showing you both sides so that you know which one to use in which situation.
Yeah, think about it.
In this case, yeah, think about it, because you're gonna want to avoid this so much that you're gonna be looking for tricks on how to test it without having to call it. There's also different schools of thought of this. Some people are like, no, if you test it the other way, you're not testing it right. You have to test it with all the Spring Boot stuff in it because that's how it runs in production. You're gonna meet people like this, but you're gonna have to build up your own thing. You have to build up your own experience and your own opinions with your own arguments as well. Like you can't let it push around like that because decisions have impact on code. Okay, so notice here. So check this out. Resource not found. So this test failed because we got an exception, and it was the Crusader Game exceptions. Resource not found exception. Person with 5 is not found. That's awesome. So even though the test failed, our service is acting the way it's supposed to. So if
We didn't do an assert, right? You didn't insert anything.
I didn't assert anything. So let's. How do we test? How do we test for this case? So to answer that one question you had, Alyssa, where you said, how many tests do I need? Well, you need a good case and you need a bad case. And when you go inside of this code, the good case is that you actually find the person and then you return it. The bad case is if the person does not exist, you want to throw an exception. So typically, if you see an if statement, you're going to have to test what's inside the if and what's outside the if. So in this case, you need 2 tests at the very least. Okay, so let's go back to the test here. Oops, right here. So this is how to test for exceptions. So we're gonna do assert throws. I forget how this, you're not helping me. There you go. Assert throws, and it's going to be resource not found exception.class, comma, and then we need our anonymous function like this. And all right, and then it actually returns the exception that was thrown. So this is a really cool test because not only can you check that the exception was thrown, you can actually check what the error message is supposed to be. And so we're going to check that it actually throws back person with ID 5 not found. I don't think that's the real one, but we'll figure it out real quick. I'm going to do exception.getMessage.
No, it says right there in the thing. It's person with 5 is not found, right?
Oh yeah, cool. Let's do that. There you go. All right, so let's run it like this so that we can see if it fails. So now when we run this, this should now pass. The exception should be caught. This can get confusing, okay? This is why tests are confusing, like, or why tests are seen as confusing.
Oh, you put PP in there.
Yeah, I know, I did that on purpose.
I did? Oh,
yeah.
I did?
Okay, so an exception is an error, right? That means that something bad happened. This test wants to make sure that we react to the bad logic appropriately. This test is saying, I am expecting you to throw a resource not found exception. If you do not throw a resource not found exception, then this test is failed because you are not acting appropriately. You need to throw an exception if the person does not exist, okay? And so then what we do now is then we check, is the message coming back from the exception, is that even correct? And here we failed because we expected P person with 5 is not found, which is what we have right here, even though we returned person with 5 is not found. So this is a typo in our test because we're expecting this weird message when in actuality it should be this. So I'm going to fix that. Now when we run this, this whole thing should pass. Any questions on this?
So typically when you test exceptions, you want to test the message too?
Yeah.
No matter what? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's...
I mean, it makes sense.
No, I mean, you don't have to. You're going to get arguments on that too. Some people don't like that you might not be as explicit as person with 5 is not found. You might say it contains person with or something like that to kind of know that you're getting the right error message. Because if you make this too close, or if you make this thing like very complicated, then when people go back and change error messages on the fly,
right,
it's going to fail the test and it's just going to tick them off. So you want to you want to figure out a good way of doing it. So yeah, you might not even, you can.
Would it be like what if you have like a constant value for some error message?
Oh yeah, you can put that in there and you can check it.
And that would be like used.
Yeah, you can have like error messages.
Yeah, some sort of thing that stores error
and
messages.
then person not found like that.
Yeah.
You can do something like that.
Okay.
Okay, so then now we have this. Oh, I want to show you something else. If we go here and I change this to a new runtime exception, so I'm changing the exception, right? If I go back to the test and I say I want a resource not found exception, when I run this, it's going to give me a fail because I threw the wrong exception in the class. And you can see it right here. It said it expected a resource not found exception, but it got a Java runtime exception. So that's cool. This test is protecting our work. Okay, now that we have this, let's go back and we're going to test the happy path. Okay, but here's the thing. We are using a real database here. Okay, by the way, if I took this out, we are still using a real database. It's just we don't need since we don't need access to the database, right? I don't have to set up the variable. But when you do Spring Boot test, this thing is loading up all of the real services possible. It's loading up a real controller. It's loading up everything. And then because we put AutoWired person CRUD service here, it's going to put the object in this variable for us, basically. And then now we can use that in our test. Does that make sense? So everything is already loaded in the background, no matter what. We're just grabbing it by making the variable and using AutoWired.
And you don't have to put the repository if you're not going to use it.
Exactly.
Right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and we don't, because I don't have a controller here either.
Yeah.
But because we're using the person repository, I'm making it AutoWired and I'm putting it here so that I can get it. So
you're pulling it from...
AutoWired doesn't mean that I'm loading it. AutoWired means I'm grabbing it from the Spring Boot context.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now that
Spring Boot is running. Spring Boot is running and it has all these objects that it created already.
It already has the beans created for you, and then you're just grabbing it.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So now that we grab the person repository bean that's loaded up, we're going to do person dot, or let's create a person. So person is equal to new person. And can we put in a first name? Nope. Yeah, we can. else do we need? Oh, it's a DTO. Gosh dang it. All right, let's just keep it like this. New person DTO, person.set first name, John, person.set last name, Connor. Do you remember his birthday?
No, it's like the 80s or something.
Wasn't he
84,
born?
85.
It was 85, right? I forget.
October 12th, 85. I don't know. I'm guessing.
What is this? Of 1985, October 1st.
February 28th, 1985. What the hell? That makes no sense.
February
Did they
what?
change? February 28th, 1985.
That's funny. All right, person.
I think he has 2 birthdays.
Okay. And set phone number. We'll just put 555. All right, so we got this guy here, right? Now what we want to do is we want to save him for real in our repository. When I say for real, I mean there's a database set up for the test folder, but there is a separate database set up for the main folder. So, and it's H2, so it really doesn't matter because when we stop running our test, the H2 database is going to be powered down and then we lose the data anyways. But if you had an application YAML, you could configure a different database for the test side and a different one for the main side. But it can still be a real database, basically. So now that we have all this, let's go ahead and do person repository. It's a real database, but it's an in-memory database. So person repository.save person, like this. And then we're going to, I'm going to do person is equal to person repository.save. That way you could see that there's an ID of 1 to it. And then I'm going to do person CRUD service dot get person by ID, and I'm going to do person dot get ID, like this. Actually, let's just, let's do like that. And I should be getting a person called expected or actual. And I'm going to do assert equals, and I want the person, or I want to get the actual person. So I'm just calling. So if you do assert equals, I'll explain why I'm doing it. If you do assert equals, you can see right here that it's expected and actual. You see how it says expected actual here? I'm just copying this formula. Yeah. So expected is the answer that it's supposed to be, what you think it's supposed to be. Actual is the value that's returned from the function or the method, and that's what that's how you want to make sure they're both the same. So I expect it to equal to the person that was saved in there, right? And the actual person I get is the one that I get when I call person CRUD service get person by ID. This might not work, right? That's why we're testing it. So when I do get person by ID, which is this number, I'm going to put a 1 just so that it's easier to. But we already talked about this earlier, how this could be an issue. But so get person by ID, I'm passing in the 1. I should get back this guy, and they should both match. So let me run this. It's running the Spring Boot test, taking forever. We're saving the person repository. We're saving the person repository. Yep, it passed. We got person 1. We put it back here, and then we compared it to this guy right here. Any questions?
So integration test is usually when you have Spring Boot running, and you have to test some of the components. And a JUnit test is when you don't have to load Spring Boot to do your testing.
Exactly. So let's do it this way now. So I'm going to take this code, and we're going to put it person CRUD service test. I'm going to show you how it changes, which is regular Java. Okay, so first things, we're not using Spring Boot test, right? There is no auto-wired. Okay, there is no auto-wired. We still need these fields because we want to access the person CRUD service. We still need an object of a person CRUD service, and we need an object of a person repository. The issue is we don't want to use a real database. Database, look at how long it takes to load up. If we could make a fake database for our uses, then that'd be much better. So to do that, we're going to do at before each, because now I want to create a setup method or run before each test method. And then in here, I'm going to make a fake repository. I'm going to make a mock repository. So person repository is equal to mockito.mock parentheses person repository.class. Okay, so now I am making a fake person repository, and I'm taking that person repository and I'm putting it inside of my CRUD service. So I'm doing person CRUD service equal to new person CRUD service, and I am passing person repository in there like that. Okay, so this goes back. Remember when you asked me, how come you're making a constructor here? Yes, right. You can 100% use magic here to grab the person repository, and you don't need that anymore. But then when you go back to your test down here, this constructor doesn't exist, so you can't pass. There's no way to give the person repository. There's no way to put the person repository inside of the person CRUD service. Okay, I mean you can make a setter too if you wanted to. So if you
that's what I was going to ask you. So if you wanted to use the AutoWire, then that just means you have to add, instead of saving code, you're just adding code.
Yeah, you're doing public void set person repository. That way you can set it later on in the test.
Yeah.
This is called dependency injection, by the way.
Right. Dependency injection. That's a keyword.
Very keyword. Key phrase. Dependency injection is when you create a setter or a constructor so that you can put in a dummy object inside of your your class so that you can more easily test it. And it doesn't have to be dummy objects too. But it's very useful for testing. It could be like, instead of a person repository, it could be like a Oracle database person repository, and then we swapped out to Postgres. So then we created a whole new Postgres person repository. So if you're changing like text, or if you're changing just different implementations of an object, you can, by using that interface of this, you can implement it differently and then pass it in. And so it's like interchangeable parts basically.
Okay.
Super, super useful. Very important to know. So just to reiterate, this setter here, this dot person repository is equal to person repository, right? So now inside of my test, instead of creating the constructor, I can just use the empty constructor, and then I can do person CRUD service dot set person repository, person repository. So this is another way of taking my own version of the person repository and putting it inside of this service, so that I can have more control of what's going on the inside, from the outside looking in, basically. Hope that made sense. Okay, so any questions, Alyssa? You want to stop me here? No, you good?
Alyssa,
No.
It's your opportunity.
This is
I
for
mean,
you.
you lost me a while ago.
What? Why didn't you say anything that if you got lost?
Oh, yeah, why did you say?
When once you get lost, then you zone out, and it's like, what's the point of this if you're zoned out?
Where do you want me to go?
Well, I just don't understand. I was never taught the basics of testing. But if you could go over Makita.
Okay, the basics are what? What are the three things? Remember the three things you do in a test?
I know, arrange, act, assert.
Okay.
Oh, nice.
So he's doing the arrange part right now.
Okay. So
That's
you're
what
doing the
for
arrange
each.
part in the before each, so you don't have to do it for every single test.
Yes.
Yeah, but you gotta know what are you trying to arrange. So
I know exactly. Are you just putting example
Yeah,
values into the test just to test the values?
Yes, yeah. And let me go back and show you what I was doing here. So using the Spring Boot test, I was loading up all of Spring because I wanted to test if the
So
get person method worked properly. Okay, but what I'm doing here is I'm showing you 3 different ways of writing the same 2 tests.
Oh, okay.
yeah, exactly.
it's
One integration way and a JUnit way.
Yeah, no, it's vanilla way.
Vanilla way. That's what we call it.
Yeah,
Vanilla is.
this is all JUnit. Everything like Spring
Oh
Boot.
yeah, true.
That's what I was gonna ask. But I thought.
Yeah, this is all JUnit. Yeah.
So then, what's the integration test? If the integration test is also JUnit.
This is the integration test is when it uses the Spring Boot test annotation to load up all of Spring Boot.
Yeah, it's
It's
using
like-
a real database.
Yeah, it's trying to use a real database. It'll try to use a real database, real controller, like everything real. So you have to be careful, because if you're calling another microservice outside of your site and you try to run a Spring Boot test and you call that method to call another site, it'll try to call the other site. Okay, like it's trying to spin up a real working version of your app in your test framework, which might not always be good.
So why would you want to test it with a database, as opposed?
Because you can use a test database instead of your real production one.
Yeah.
You can in your setup files. You can say when I'm running this class or this test case, then use this database instead.
Yeah.
Right? Isn't that?
Yep. But it's slow.
Yeah, it's still slow.
But yeah, so you want to try to stay away from the slow test as much as possible. But yeah, you can write your own. You can do your own database. You can also have your own H2 database, which is the in-memory database, and that's the one we're using right now. So
you don't test the file; you test the H2.
We're not testing. We're testing get. So when you go here to get person by ID, we get the person repository. We find by ID, right? So we're talking to the database. We say, can you find the person with this ID? We put it in the bucket. If optional is empty, so if the bucket is empty, we want to throw an exception. If the bucket is not empty, then we return what's inside the bucket and we return the person. It's very straightforward. So you only have to test 2 things because of this.
So you're testing that it finds the person and that it throws the
Yes,
exception.
exactly. Correct.
Okay. I know me and Andrew had a question earlier about how you're to.
How would you test an email?
Yes, but how do you test a method that returns a void? Because
You can't.
That's a good
You
question.
can't. That's a very good question, but you can't. So that's kind of the reason why you want to return objects when you're calling methods. But if you're returning void, then there's no object for you to return, or there's no object return for you to test again. What's that?
So there's nothing you can test. Then
there's still stuff.
I mean, you still got to test it, but it's hard. It makes it harder for you to test, right? 'Cause
Yeah.
How are you supposed to
How
confirm?
Correct. So you got to write your methods so they're testable, or you got to break apart your methods so that you test specific things. That's what makes testing hard. There is a learning curve to it, but once you get it, it's a lot easier and you'll understand what you got to do. But basically, you gotta work your solution in such a way so that you can test the components piece by piece by piece, and then the integration test is pretty much all of them coming together and making sure the whole thing works.
Okay. I mean, I don't
So with the email thing, like let's say she's testing an email, something receiving an email message. Would an integration test have to take in some sort of like actual testing email server?
That's end to end,
Like,
and you
that's end-to-end?
could do that, but you don't have to. But I'm sure if for enterprise they would set up something like that, but that would require something a lot more than what we're doing right now. Like you would just use fake stuff, and that's kind of like what I'm showing you all this. That's why I'm showing you all of this, and I'm covering every single aspect because I want you to understand. We're covering a lot, so you have to rewatch this video. But like, I want you to understand all the different ways of testing, and then from there you can figure out, okay, which one do I use?
But these aren't applied to the email server.
That's the thing.
It does.
Yeah, 100%. You're going to see that it's parallel because you're using some service class to send your email, right? So you got to make a fake service. You got to make a fake email class. So to make it so that you don't actually send out an email, right? You want to make it be a dummy class, so it doesn't send out an email, and then you can then figure out if you called the right method. Now I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so let's go. Let's fix our code. So remember this. So can you tell me what dependency injection is? Do you remember what that was?
You said when you create a setter or constructor to put dummy objects into for easier testing.
Yeah, yeah. So this right here is a dependency because we're using this in our code. But if this is AutoWired is using a real version of this class, so it's a real database. I don't want to do that. If I want to make it so I can pass in my own dummy object, my own dummy person repository, I will. The best way of doing it is just create a constructor, person CRUD service. My bad. And then what's cool about this is that Spring Boot automatically knows you don't need AutoWired at this point anymore. That actually makes sense. I like the AutoWired analogy or connection we just made. AutoWired means that you're pulling the bean and putting it into a variable. Oh, actually, yeah. So
I thought I was making another object of, or another instance of that class.
it Spring does it automatically. AutoWired gives it to you.
Mm.
So but the thing is you don't need AutoWired because it'll automatically provide the bean to your constructor.
So when would you need AutoWired when you're not doing dependency injection with the constructor?
Yes, correct. So when you do this, you're gonna need AutoWired.
Okay.
But if you do the constructor, Spring Boot will know. Okay, I'm gonna put you in. That's a good
If you
question.
put AutoWired, if you put AutoWired on top of that, what happens if you do that?
No, if you put AutoWired over the constructor, it's still fine.
No, of the
There
primary
is
person.
there. It will try. I think it might ignore the constructor.
No, just ignore it. Okay.
Yeah. Well, let's try it out. So if I'm running this, shoot. Shoot, wrong. Oh yeah, family tree application.
Can we use Cigar Party as an example too? Since
What?
that has nothing related to my thing.
Cigar party. What are you talking
Yeah,
about?
we can use Cigar Party.
We can so,
Oh look,
Unit 7.
it ignores it. It says I'm in the constructor. So AutoWired up here still calls the constructor. But if you have setters and all this other weird stuff, AutoWired will then dictate which one to use. So just remember that. So like if I had a setter down here, or if I had a constructor that only, like say I had multiple fields here, and then the constructor only did like one or two of them, the AutoWired would tell her which one to use to load up the stuff. Does that make sense?
So if you have multiple constructors that take in that same field as a parameter, it'll just choose which one does it choose?
Well, what if we do this? I mean, this is why you don't really want to do this.
Oh, no August constructor, so you have an old document.
Yeah, and I'll put that there. I think it'll do it, and then when I try to do get person by ID, it'll throw a 500 exception because it didn't actually load the person repository.
I see.
Did you see the constructor message? Nope, the constructor message is not there, so it didn't run. Oh wait, if I took it out anyways, so let's test it.
So you can only have one.
Oh, see, look, internal server error. It did blow up.
Okay, yeah.
So
AutoWired is
still useful. You should know what it does. So don't forget about it just because you're not using it.
If you put on multiple, what happens if you put on multiple constructors? That's stupid. Would that break something?
You probably will.
Yeah, but what is that constructor doing?
It's creating the instance of your CRUD service, right? Person CRUD service. The constructor is.
The AutoWired anyways.
Oh, so it won't let you do that because it's like.
I don't know. Let's test it. It'll probably fail because it's saying it doesn't know which one to pick.
Yeah. That's what I would guess.
Really? Yeah, there it is. Thank you. I was about to say like, no, this is not JavaScript.
You're being with the person controller. Yeah, so it's like there's two of them, right?
So it couldn't create. This is where it gets a little misleading. It says it has an error creating being with. The reason it couldn't create person controller is because it couldn't get the person CRUD service. So if you go through here, unsatisfied dependency expected to construct a parameter, error creating being with person CRUD service.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
I see. That's cool. All right.
Yes, now you understand. You're beginning to understand these error messages. It can get really crazy. Okay, so this is a good way of doing it. Best practices way of doing it. Now let's go back to the test here. So Alyssa, right here, we're doing Spring Boot test. AutoWired. We're grabbing the person CRUD service and the person repository from the Spring Boot context, which is just a special phrase for the bucket of all your beans that Spring Boot created. So we're getting the person CRUD service from the bucket and the person repository from the bucket, and then we're using them. Okay, we're not instantiating them because Spring Boot already instantiated them for us. Does that make sense? It's like we're just grabbing them. It's like grabbing apples from the tree. Spring grew into a tree with all the fruit hanging out, and to pick them, we just do AutoWired, and we now have that fruit inside of our variable. We didn't do anything ourselves. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, and then here, we're using a real version of the person repository, so we're saving it, and that's why we can do get person by ID, because we're actually calling, when we do get person by ID, we are actually inside the code talking to this real database that we put in here. Okay, so this is going to change. Here, we are making a fake repository, and we're putting it inside of the person CRUD service. So what that means is when we start interacting with this object, this object will be interacting with a fake service. So if we run this off the bat, I think this will pass. Because by default, the fake repository will return null. Yeah, it's awesome. Good job, Makito. This one will fail though because the fake repository is not going to actually save this person because it's fake. There is no database. It'll just say like, yeah, I saved it. It'll actually make this null. Well, let's see what happens. I wonder if this thing will pass or not. Okay, test failed, and the reason it failed was resource not found exception was thrown. Person with 1 is not found. Okay, so this is, even though it looks like we saved it, this is fake. This is all BS. Okay. When we call it in here and we try to find by ID, by default, this thing's returning null or its equivalent. It's returning an empty optional. And so because it's an empty optional, it throws resource not found, person with 1 is not found. Does that make sense? Yes? No? You want me to cover it again?
Alyssa.
Oh, you're asking me specifically?
Yes, because
Oh, I
it's
thought
for
he
you.
was asking everybody.
There's nobody else on the call.
No, there's more people to call. But this is.
Dude, this isn't just Alyssa.
Yes, it is. It is. It's literally Alyssa's.
It's literally Alyssa's hours.
We would be doing my email verification.
No, we're not doing that.
No.
Yeah, I'm going to put a thumbnail with your picture on it. Okay.
Bro, okay, well.
So do you have questions on this? Are you cool with this?
I don't think I'll be able to write it myself.
Well, I know, but do you get the logic?
Sort of, yeah.
Sort of? Okay.
What's the difference between Makito testing and regular testing?
Oh, that's a good question. So the difference between Makito testing is that it's super fast compared to Spring Boot testing. So I'll show that to you. But what you need to do though with Makito testing is that you have to define what the classes are going to do. Okay. So instead of doing person is equal to person repository dot save, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do person or Makito dot when, and then I'm going to put in the person repository dot save any. So what this is saying is, if anybody calls person repository dot save with, it doesn't matter what field they put in there, or it doesn't matter what value they put in there. If I do person repository dot save with any value, then I want you to return the person above, right here. Okay.
What is you have to use Makito dot when or just when? Because I think I see.
Yeah, you can use when. And I'm sorry, I don't know why I did save. Like it's still, we never call save in here. So you see how this is like why it doesn't make sense what I just did? You never call save in here, so who cares about setting up the save method? It's a dummy. I just confused myself. Like it's a fake database. It's not, it doesn't do any saving. So what you want to do is you want to do Makito.when. What were you gonna ask?
When I was researching the void thing, there was like all these do nothings.
Oh yeah. Basically, you shouldn't be writing voids to begin with. That's more of an advanced topic. But if you did do a void,
I had to do a void for the email verification.
Why?
Yeah, why?
That's just how it was set up, and it works that way.
What do you mean that's how it's set up? That makes
no
no sense. You could do a return. You
Yeah.
can return true. You can always return true when you get to this point in the code.
Yeah.
So just return true on the emails for just no reason. I'm
Yeah.
just going to return true just so I can test that it returns true. It's not returning anything. It's sending out the email. That's why it was void.
Does it throw?
Is
Well, I'll show you how to test. I'll show you how to do it. Okay, one way of doing it. So you're right. So so the method that you're calling is a void, right? And,
Yes,
and
it's
you
a
have
void.
you have no control over that code because it's.
Well, I wrote that code, but it's just I didn't think that we would be returning anything because it doesn't. All it does is send the email out, and then there's no need to return anything. That's why.
Yeah. Okay.
It was like that. I mean,
Yeah.
What class are you using in that method? What if whatever you try to do?
Send verification link or something.
Yeah. Okay. So let me explain real quick. So, in your case, if you wanted to, so let me just get through this, and then I'll show you how we can test this also.
Fine. I can show you what it says later.
No. I'm going to show you through this right here.
Yeah.
Okay. So person actual is equal to person CRUD service dot get person by ID, right? We call this here, and we now have a fake repository here, right? So I want to make the fake repository. When I do find by ID, I want it to return a actual person inside the bucket. All right. So
that's what you're mocking. He's mocking that.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing right there. So when I say when somebody calls person repository find by ID 1, then I want you to return this person.
Okay, simple enough.
Yeah. Then when I do this person CRUD service get person by ID 1, then it calls this. It does the logic that I just gave it. So it's going to return a person in the optional. This is not empty, so it'll skip this, and then it'll return the actual person. So when I go here, this test should now pass. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. And there you go, it passes. What's cool about this is if I change this to a 2, it's going to throw an exception instead of returning the person. And the reason for that is because I said only the times when somebody calls find by ID with 1 do I want you to return this person. So when I run this, there you go. You see that it failed because it says resource not found. So resource not found makes you think like, oh, it doesn't exist in the database. There is no database. It's 100% fake. This is all fake. Okay. The reason that it failed is because I told it the only time you return a person is if you call it with 1L. Okay. And so when I do get person by ID 2 and I go inside the code, the 2 in here goes in here, and then that thing returns nothing. Is that good? Okay, you good, Alyssa?
Yes.
Okay, next thing. This is what you want to know.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Makito.verify. So verify can only be called on mock objects. You cannot verify real objects. Like I cannot do verify person dot set phone number. It's not going to work. I can only do it on things that are defined as mock objects, which is this right here. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to make a mock object of your email class, and then under Makito.verify, you're going to want to do person repository parentheses, and then this is the method find by ID, and then you can either do any like this, or you can do an actual specific value. We're going to put 1L, and that's it. We're done. So Makito.verify person repository find by ID, and it's weird too. Notice how the object goes inside the parentheses, and then the method comes afterwards. It's just the way Makito is. It's weird. So if I do this, verify person repository find by ID 1, this will work still. I'll pass. Oh, actually, it won't. It'll break because I put a 2 in here.
2.
Yeah.
So you're just finding the person with ID of 1.
Say that again.
And you're just verifying that a person.
No, I'm verifying that this method was actually called. So in your case, you're saying I want to verify that the send email server whatever thing was called. That will show you. That will verify for you that yeah, I did call it.
So the find by ID of 1 verify is called.
Yeah, the person repository find by ID 1 is called. So if I hit run here like this,
what is well? Listen, in your function for the same, what parameters does it take in?
Yeah, I don't have IDs.
Okay. No. But do you have any parameters?
Yeah, let me check. 1 second. Service. It just takes in a user.
Okay, so you're gonna throw in a user in there, right?
Yeah.
On a mock.
Yeah, you can do that, or you can do this. You can do an any like this, and then it'll just make sure that you've called the method with anything. So if you hit run, this should still pass. Okay, and then this will work. And then you can also do, well, let's see what happens if you do 2. So I called 1, I returned 1, or I defined the behavior of when I call it with 1, I return an object. I'm actually going to call the method with 1, but I'm going to verify if person repository find by ID 2 was called. This should fail, and it should say.
So is the verified? Is that like an assert type of function?
Yeah. A verify is an assert. Verify tells you whether or not you called it or not. And so it says right
I got it. Okay.
Arguments are different. It wanted person repository to find by ID 2. The actual invocations have different arguments. Person repository find by ID 1. So what it's saying is you called the person repository find by ID method, but you put in a 1 instead of a 2. So because of that, this is a failure.
What happens if you comment out the one part, the first one? Let's just say that you never ran.
No, it doesn't. Yeah, if you do this, it'll still do it. Oh,
it'll give you an error.
It'll throw an exception.
Is it always only find by ID?
Yeah, even if you do not define it, find by ID, it'll still verify that you called it.
Right, of course. But I'm just talking about the error message.
It's not going to verify if you call it if you have a field that doesn't have an ID.
What do you mean?
What?
Like, how is the find by ID verifying that? I thought the verify verifies that you called it.
Yeah, Makito verify, and I am wrapping the parentheses around this object, and so Makito verify person repository. Then I hit the dot, and then all of the methods that I want to verify then pop up magically.
Those are all the methods to that class, right?
Yeah, these are all the methods to the person repository class. And then I'm going to do find. So I can even do find all if I wanted to. So now I'm going to verify that the find all method was called.
Which doesn't happen when you finish.
It doesn't happen, so this is going to break.
Yeah, your get person does not do a find all.
Yeah, and then it breaks. It says wanted but not invoked. It says wanted but not invoked. Person repository find all was not called, basically.
There you go. That makes sense.
Okay, there's other cool things you can do. I can also do comma times 0. So
how many times you've ran it?
Yeah, how many times? The times will tell you how many times you run it. So if you do Makito verify person repository times 0 find all, that means this has to run 0 times. So when I run this should pass now. Yeah, you can even run it multiple times, like 2 times if you wanted to. Yep, now it passes. If you do 2, it'll fail, but it's still basically the same concept.
All right.
Once this goes,
so this helps with the void because you're just verifying that objects within that voided method actually are executed.
Exactly. So if
anything.
What was that?
So I said you just want to verify that the method has run.
Yes.
Yes.
Returning anything.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So what class is your method using?
Mine is taking in a user and it's making an object called simple mail message, and it's setting the subject, adding the content, and then just sending the message. I mean.
So should we have to make a Makito for each of those different?
I don't know.
We would have to look at it, but ideally you'd want to just create the objects. The minor classes you create objects of them are real instances of them, but then the stuff that's complicated you just make a mocks.
Like, so what I have to do? Would I have to mock every single field? Like mock the subject, mock the content.
We would have to look at that, but
okay, we can add it later.
Yeah. Okay. So now that we have this, right? Let's go on to this. We only got 3 minutes left. Shoot. So we can cover this real quick. So notice how fast this. By the way, notice how fast this runs.
Yeah. No more Spring Boot crap.
No Spring Boot stuff. It ran fast, but you need to write it specifically to use this format. And then finally, let me go back and copy all this because it's the same code. for almost the same code. So here, I want to do a person CRUD service with fake repository integration test. So this is where it gets confusing. You'll get extra bonus points if you can remember this. At Spring Boot test. So now I'm auto wiring. Okay.
So yeah. Okay.
But I want to use a fake database now. So people get confused because they think it's a mock. That's not the case. Mock belongs to Makito. Makito is vanilla Java. This mock annotation doesn't do anything. You'll be using the real database. You'll see this in enterprise.
Doesn't do anything.
Yeah, mock in Spring Boot context, you'll have a fake person repository, but inside of Spring Boot, you'll have a real repository. Does that make sense? Because AutoWire only grabs.
So this is mock saying that you're getting your testing repository for this.
You think you have a mock person repository, but you're not. There's the Spring Boot, like this service will be calling the real person repository inside of the Spring Boot context.
Oh, okay.
So the way to get around this is to do mock bean. And so if you notice, if you import mock bean, you'll see that mock bean is Spring Boot framework boot test mock Makito mock bean. So mock bean is used by Spring Boot. So if you put at mock bean, when Spring Boot loads up, it's going to say, oh, you want me to make a fake person repository for you? Great, I'll do that. It'll then make a Makito person repository and put it inside of Spring Boot for you.
Okay.
So now you don't need any of this stuff.
Yeah, because you don't have to set it up.
You don't have. Yeah, you don't need a constructor.
It's already been set up for you. Is it a singleton too?
Yeah, it's a singleton too. All of it's gone. Okay, the only thing you need, and everything else works just like normal. So person CRUD service or person or when you set up the Makito, so person repository defined by ID. So let's run this just to make sure. So this test will automatically fail because the repository is fake and has nothing. It'll return it empty and it'll throw an exception. Jeez.
What was the error message there?
There you go. It works. And this one, it still works because we then tell
doing the mock.
Yeah, mock it when you do the one, you return the person. We've verified that the person repository defined by ID1 was called, and we assert that person matches actual. And yeah. Any questions before we sign off? Everybody else, thank you so much. You guys have a great night, and I'll see you guys on Saturday.